Today, my guest is Jake Bezzant. He is the CEO of Parking Sense USA. They're the provider of intelligent parking solutions, or the Uber of parking. And we're going to talk with him about the future of parking and how real estate investors can utilize their product. And we'll learn more about that here in just a minute. But first, just a quick reminder, if you like the show, please let us know. You can do this by, you can leave a comment, you can share the show, and you can subscribe. And if you'd like to see how handsome our guests are, you can check out our YouTube channel, Commercial Real Estate Pro Network, and check us out there. With that, I'd like to welcome my guest, Jeff Bezzant. Jeff, I've done this now how many times? Jake Bezzant. Jake, welcome to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network, CREPN Radio.
Darren, it's a pleasure.
I tell you, I did have a little bit of coffee this morning, but I might have not had enough here. But looking forward to talking with you, Jake. Before we dive into it, if you could do myself and the listeners a favor and just share a little bit about your background.
Sure. So Parking Sense has been around 4 years now, become the dominant provider of this technology in the US. But myself and a group of other individuals started another company about 15 years ago called Smart Parking. It was the first in-ground sensor for parking in the world. So it was just looking to utilize spaces as best it could. We took that business public in Australia, listed on the ASX. It's still listed today. And we went to the UK and Europe, became the largest parking operator in the UK and Europe. And that, like I say, that company's still listed today. We saw a real gap in the market about 6 years ago for this type of technology, which was a much smarter technology, two-way communication, giving a better user experience. Parking is the first and last experience that you have in a building or anywhere you go. And the easier that experience is, the better the experience tends to be. So we came to the US with that in mind, built this company up, like I said, inside 3.5, 4 years. We've become the largest provider of this technology in the US. And therefore probably around the world. And so it's been a great ride for us, very enjoyable, love doing business in the US, for sure.
Got it. And just to kind of set the stage for our listeners too, I want to make sure everybody understands that, our goal here at Commercial Real Estate Pro Network and CREPN Radio is to gauge professionals like Jake and investors to learn more about how we can grow our portfolio. And mostly, I think the conversation for the most part has been centered around multifamily. I think that's been kind of the hot buzzword for the last couple of years. But we'd like to, continue the conversation in other arenas and make sure that we're constantly learning about other opportunities and how you can apply these other opportunities and make possibly additional revenue centers for your business or increase those. And so that's why I was excited to have Jake on the show here. And so let's back up here just a little bit about what you were saying here. So you described kind of the market where you guys started. You came to the U.S. and now you're the largest and stuff. And I think probably the point that we should probably start, just so everybody has a firm understanding of what is Parking Sense. Could you describe a little bit about what it is and how it works?
Sure. So there's three parts to the technology, if you will. The first part is the hardware that we install in facility. So that's the lights and the signs that guide you around. Many of you will have seen green and red lights in facilities. Green means there's a space available. Red, obviously, there's a car in there. And then different colors to designate spaces. For example, ADA blue. You can have reserved spaces and VIP spaces, etc. Two pieces of technology that fall off that technology. First and foremost is the phone app. So the phone app is unique in the fact that our phone app links up to our hardware via low energy Bluetooth. And what that does is it allows the user experience to not have to wait at a gate, not have to pull a ticket, not have to go and find a pay machine afterwards. You simply get guided to the facility via Google Maps inside the app. You drive into the space available for you. The app links up itself and tells you what space you're in, what the charge is going to be, or if you've got free parking for X amount of time. You push accept and you walk away. When you're finished, the app will tell you where you've parked, so you can get back to your car and you just drive out. It sends you a digital receipt. So it's truly frictionless parking. The third piece, and I guess the piece that will interest the real estate folks the most, is around that data capture. So every single sensor we put in, which is in every single stall, tells us when people are parking, where they're parking, how long they're parking for, what spaces are being utilized, which spaces aren't being utilized. What is the true number you can oversell your facility on? For example, Dallas Galleria, they had sold about 75% of the parking. So even with occupancy in the buildings around 50%. So even at trying to sell the parking at the standard real estate, I'm going to oversell the parking by 120%. They weren't going to get to their numbers. They've now utilizing our technology and utilizing every single space and understanding when people are parking and how long they're parking for. They've oversold their parking by more than 300%. So there's some real value out there just utilizing the data.
When you say oversold, the first thing comes to mind is trying to get on a plane and waiting for the seat and being offered all sorts of coupons or whatever for later travel. Can you explain what that means?
Sure, and that's typically the experience people have when it's overselling, right? In this environment, because we're using real-time and historical data, we can oversell knowing that we have a margin of error and that we're never going to not have a space for someone that we tell to go and park somewhere. So this is the only system in the world that is truly real-time. So at any one time, if we guide someone to a parking facility or tell them to park there, we know there's a space available for them. So you don't get into that scenario where somebody turns up, they paid for their parking or reserved their parking, and there's no space available like you could get with an airline system.
Got it. So a couple of things that come to mind. So, and I think I may have had an experience. I don't know if you guys are in the Portland.
Yes, sir.
So I know that as you enter, you see the lights. I think there's lights above a spot. There's somehow, because I don't know that there's an app that I remember using, but there were lights that would guide you you'd recognize you didn't have to go up and down and up and down and up and down and hope that you'd find a spot eventually. It was pretty easy to see where the spot was open. Is that?
Yeah, correct. So, and that's the lights and the signs piece, and you don't have to use all the technology at once. Some facilities will just use the lights and signs to guide people around, give a better user experience. But most of our clients over time transition to using the phone app, transition away from using gates, tickets, just because it's a better, faster customer experience. As I'm sure everyone that comes on the show will attest to, time is the one thing we don't have more of. And the last thing anyone wants to be doing is circulating around a parking building looking for parking spaces.
Got it. So take me through kind of we've talked about like the hardware and the application and kind of the experience that at least I think I'm familiar with, and anybody who's been in a parking garage at a busy time, holidays or whatever, is probably familiar with. Take me through some of the benefits from a property owner investor standpoint. If I own and I'm assuming this is unique to parking garages, or would it work with a parking lot as well, or is it?
No, we do outdoor lots as well. Correct.
Okay. Talk to me a little bit about the benefits. Or you mentioned the overselling ability at I think the Galleria is what you're talking about. But talk to me a little bit about, as a parking lot owner, what the benefits, additional opportunity of using your technology would be.
Yeah, sure. So I guess you got two categories of owners: ones that are going in to buy a facility, and then someone who is looking for either a short-term, long-term hold, and then ultimately, obviously, looking to sell the facility. So I guess in that first scenario, the real benefit is this system will give you the real-time accurate data to understand what is going on in your facility. Everyone knows that from time to time, tenants will abuse the system, use more parking spaces than they should. Visitors will use spaces longer than they should, etc. So this system will allow you to control that. It will allow you buy stall to allocate a number of stalls to a tenant. If they go over the allocated number, because the app also works as a digital parking pass, so we know every minute, every day, who should be parking where and if they're parking in the right spaces. So, for example, if you've got a tenant that is paying for 200 parking stalls, as soon as they have 201 parkers, that one parker they get charged for. So you start utilizing the spaces better. You might have a scenario where you don't have enough parking stalls to accommodate visitor parking into a building, which is a real issue in today's environment. You can start doing things like, okay, we've got 25 parking stalls allocated to visitors, but we're going to time restrict them. So the visitor gets sent the app with their email invite. They get guided to the space that's been allocated to them. They're allowed to park in that space for 2 hours. They get an alert on the app to tell them that their 2 hours is up, and they can either move their car or they get charged a higher hourly rate after their 2 hours is up. So you can start getting compliance that way. You can start doing things with tenants, like, for example, we link to Outlook calendars so that you can utilize spaces when people are away or away on business, etc. It depends on the facility itself, but the system is all built around how do we maximize that individual space. You're talking about a piece of building that costs on average about $30,000 per stall to build from ground up. So it's a fair old investment, and if we can allocate that in a certain way and get better utilization out of that building, it obviously has a real benefit. On the flip end is, when you're looking to sell a building, maximizing revenue out of the building. So you may have 20 or 40 stalls that you're not utilizing. We can allocate those stalls, we can reserve them out, sell them online, and those stalls then start generating more revenue, which is obviously a CapEx out the other side when you sell the building.
No, that's awesome. I'm curious. You mentioned kind of like the tenant, and I'm thinking kind of like two different applications. You've got the kind of the day use. Somebody goes, they get to work, park the car, they're there all day, they leave, versus the kind of more the shopping experience or the experience parker that's more of a temporary thing. Can you speak to either one of those? Is there a benefit application on with your product and that, or?
Absolutely. I mean, that more casual parker or that retail parker, generally the real benefit to them is the validation option, because the way the app works is we can use QR codes in store or in an office environment as well to validate parking. So again, it's a much more seamless process. When you go and buy something in a shopping mall, for example, you just scan the QR code when you buy the product, and that validates your parking on the way out. So a real cost benefit there. We can integrate into rewards apps as well. So it's not a one-stop shop. We can work with other app providers across multiple industries. But certainly we've seen in that commercial real estate space, the integration we see today is more around that internal guidance inside a building as well. A lot of buildings are developing their own app, and parking is the final piece that we add into their app to guide people not just in the building but in the parking as well.
Got it. Do you see any long-term decrease in expense? I was just thinking of like parking attendants and that kind of stuff. Is that?
Absolutely. Ultimately, I think this technology allows the building owners to make an informed decision as to whether they want as many staff on site or even any staff at all. I mean, all the information gets sent up into the cloud and held there, both historical and real time. So you can see every minute of every day what's going on in your facility, and that creates massive efficiencies on the operating side and the people on site side.
Got it. On the application of the product, is there an ideal number of spaces or kind of like a minimum number of spaces that you found to be?
Not for us. I mean, in general, we have seen as sites as small as 20 or 40 stalls. Ideally, our typical range is between 400 to say 10,000 stalls, something like that in a parking facility. But like I say, we've done those smaller facilities. Anytime you need space utilization, you need to find a way of generating more revenue out of parking, etc., then this technology is going to be applicable to you.
When looking at the different applications or opportunities, I mean, we've talked about airports, shopping malls. I'm assuming office space based on kind of office parking garage based on the tenant kind of thing.
Cool.
And you mentioned you can do both the garage as well as the lot. Not a problem.
Correct. So LA Metro is a good example of that. So LA Metro, largest parking guidance contract in the world, which is the one we won about 18 months ago. It's 21,000 spaces first phase, 45,000 spaces second phase. We're three-quarters of the way through that first phase now. And that's probably a 60-40 split in terms of 60% of it is garages, 40% is on-surface lots. And their real driver was bringing all of their facilities together, showing patrons where spaces were available, where they weren't, and making it a seamless process, no gates, no tickets, just in and out.
Got it. Have you had much experience with kind of like the mixed use, retail below and
Absolutely. And that's sort of the area that I think this technology comes into its own as well, because you start to look at, well, how many spaces are being used by each side, retail versus commercial real estate versus the apartment buildings, etc. So in that environment, again, we can make sure that the right people are parking the right spaces using the digital parking passes. We can make sure that if retail is really getting jammed up, then we can start to time restrict parking and make sure that people are only using 2 or 3 hours of that parking. We can allow tenants in buildings to allocate some of their parking to retail and charge for it if they want to. So there's all of that sort of application that you can start utilizing spaces in different ways.
Got it. I was just in there thinking, have you guys approached or have you been asked by any kind of cities about not necessarily the garage, but I'm just thinking like curbside parking? Is that an application that would work? Or
Absolutely, and I think that's where cities are going. The challenge for cities is they're all trying to apply the smart city methodology, I guess, which is to get cars off street. Get furniture off street, for example, pay machines, signage, etc., even to a certain extent rubbish bins. So for cities, they're trying to get people to park in parking buildings, get them off street as quickly as possible. Traffic management, we know that it's 75% occupied. Parking buildings become hard to maneuver without guidance. We know that streets are exactly the same, but a third of people circulating in streets today in any city around the world are looking for parking. So the ability to guide them from their home directly to a building that they can park in and park them nice and quickly, you're cutting emissions. Same in a parking building itself.
I hadn't even thought about the emissions thing, but I've certainly contributed in my search for a parking space. Know the drill there. Trying to think here on some other questions. I think one of the things that occurs to me is with the kind of the migration back to the urban core that's occurred. I'm assuming this is a bigger problem. Obviously, just more people going to a smaller space. And I would think that what's the resistance you've seen when people have like said, no thanks, we're all good. We like the old-fashioned way of making people grind through a parking spot.
Yeah, we've seen that. We've seen some resistance there, particularly, I guess, the fear of the unknown. I mean, this technology is purely greenfields. It's the latest and the greatest. So I think we've seen a fear of the unknown to a certain degree, but certainly we haven't seen a customer outright say no. Some have taken longer than others, for sure. But, the only question, I guess, that gets raised a lot is around, okay, well, what about as there's a decline in car ownership? What happens then? Well, we believe, and the technology was built around this, that as that driverless car evolution comes to fruition, and we know that the Uber, Lyft, taxi environment, that driverless car experience is probably within 3 years. But in terms of individuals owning, on a large scale, owning their own driverless car, you're talking 10, 15 years. So the question for us is, okay, well, that's fantastic for this technology because those cars are not going to be allowed to circulate. They're going to have to get off street. They're going to have to charge. They're going to have to wait for their human to call them, and then they drive out. So for us to be able to send that data to a car, for that car to be able to pay and link up via GPS right now, which is all the stuff that we can do, and we're working with the major car companies right now who are all testing that in Silicon Valley, that actually enhances this technology. All of a sudden, a building owner can go with, well, I've got 40 spaces free in my building. I'm going to allocate that to an Uber or a Lyft or a taxi environment, allow them to charge. I'm going to charge them to do that in terms of dollars per hour or per wattage used. And it's a way of generating more revenue. So that's probably one of the larger barriers we've seen, but obviously we're pretty excited that that is a barrier, and it's obviously one we've broken down.
Yeah, no, it's interesting how you kind of broke that down. I mean, the fear was what about the driverless cars, and there won't be any cars, and the reality is you're saying, no, there's going to be more demand, and look, we'll be talking right to the car, tell them park here.
Absolutely.
That's pretty cool. With all of the wins on technology and stuff, there's always the system is down kind of a thing. What can you talk to that? Have you had any of those? Does that happen, or is that what happens when that happens? I guess.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, technology is renowned around the world for having issues somewhere, right? What we've found is that we took a very robust, I guess, simple hardware technology that is standalone in each stall in terms of if there's an issue with one sensor, it doesn't affect the other sensors. So we've minimized that. We've got real-time alerts in our systems. Everything is componentized so that literally it's 2 clips and we've replaced a sensor. So we believe that we've minimized that as much as possible. I think our team have done a fantastic job at creating a technology that is super simple, I guess, on the customer-facing side, and then super robust with redundancies on the back-end side to ensure that we have that reliability that is, without question, unmatched in the industry.
Got it. On the process, you talked about kind of the little bit of, I guess we haven't really talked about it exactly, but just kind of some of the pushback you've gotten. And so I'm kind of curious if you can talk just a little bit about, say I've got a parking garage and we're talking and you lay it out. What kind of expense? I mean, can you describe what a
Absolutely. So we have a capital upfront cost if people want to buy the hardware. Typically in the real estate industry, we see it as a service-based fee, so no capital upfront. A typical customer will ask us to do a 5-year contract. We will put all the technology in at our cost. We will fund the whole thing, and it's an operating service that can then be expensed back through the tenants if they wish. And you're typically looking at about 15 to 19 cents per square foot per month for this sort of technology. So we've rolled it out in that way so that there isn't that upfront cost. There is just an ongoing fee through a 5-year period.
Got it. And so the you find like more like a service use as far as what people are agreeing. Let's say that we say you and I come to an agreement today. What are we talking about timeline to get it installed and up and running?
So we're fortunate as a manufacturer of the product that we hold no less than 20,000 units in the US in our warehouse in Texas at any one time. 6 offices across the US also hold stock. So we're looking at a less than 1 month to get the product fully installed, turnkey, handed over to you from the moment we start to the moment we finish. Lead times are very, very short, and the product was built around that. To install the actual product on site, you're looking at about 15 minutes per stall to install it. So it's pretty quick, not invasive. And we had to do that because a number of our clients, airports, for example, don't have that downtime. It's busy the whole time. So you couldn't allocate huge amounts of parking buildings to the install.
From an income kind of standpoint, do you have any kind of average expectations of increase for somebody before and after, what they should expect or what they could expect?
Yeah, we do. I mean, it is very much case sensitive in terms of different environments and what they're trying to achieve. Are they charging for parking? Are they not? But like I say, if you look at that oversell ability of something like the Dallas Galleria, where they make all their money obviously out of leasing up the buildings and getting those tenant rates up. They're a great example. Inside 3.5 years, they're now selling 2 of those buildings with over 95% occupancy. So the value add there is huge. In a parking environment where you have casual rates, you can surge price, and you could be looking at anywhere from 40 to 50% uplift on the parking charges as well, generating more revenue. But it really is case sensitive depending on what the building owner is trying to achieve.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that surge pricing. I would think that would be a huge opportunity there.
Absolutely.
So that's great. Are there, excuse me, are there any mistakes that you've seen property owners make when considering, if a property owner's been considering ParkSense that they could avoid?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think property owners sometimes forget what we talked about earlier in the interview, which is parking is the first and last experience that people have when they come to your building and leave your building. So interestingly, when you look at surveys, most property owners will say parking is number 21 on the priority list of things that they want to achieve with their property and fix and facelift, etc. But in reality, that is the experience that nearly every single person that comes to that building has every single day. So the ability to provide a better service on that side helps with retentions, not just in terms of tenant retention, but those tenants themselves retaining staff. A better parking experience, a better experience all round is what staff tend to contribute to staying in a job longer.
No, that's it's funny you mentioned that, the first and last experience, and it by by all means it is, but it's, if you had asked me, it would have not been anything that I would have thought of, because you're thinking more of your destination as opposed to that experience before you get to the experience or your destination.
Exactly. And American Express headquarters in Phoenix, in partnership with JLL, we're just doing 2 large buildings for them. And that's a massive project. And for them, it was all about their staff. They don't charge for parking. It was purely about giving a better user experience. The mindset of their staff before they come into the building and leave at the end of the day because they can just find their car was huge for them. Productivity can go up by more than 25% just by having a better user experience before you get to your desk. So it's important when you start talking about numbers of 10, 15,000 staff.
Oh, that's kind of funny when you think about the productivity improvement based on just a better attitude, better experience. And I'm sure that applies even with the customer experience shopping. I'm assuming you could find the same to be there too.
Absolutely.
If we were to sum up this conversation, what's the one thing you'd like the listeners to gain from today's interview?
ParkingSense is the most modern, future-proof product in the market today. If you're looking to be at the top of your game and represent your building in the best possible light, then you need this technology. ParkingSense will fund it all. It's a square foot price. It's an operating expense. And you need it today, because if you don't, you will fall behind the buildings around you that are installing this product.
Oh, that's great. Jake, where can the listeners go if they'd like to learn more or connect with you?
The easiest place is jump on our website, which is www.parkingsense.com. That has all the information. It has our support emails, our support team numbers to call in your area, and more than happy to come down, do case studies on buildings. And our team are actively out in all the major cities in the US installing product and selling to people like you listening today. Awesome.
Well, Jake, thanks again for taking the time to talk. I've learned a lot and enjoyed it, and I hope we can do it again soon.
Darren, it's been my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. For our listeners, if you like this episode, you can help us grow. You can like, you can share, you can comment, and subscribe. Remember, the more you know, the more you grow. that's all we've got this week. Until next time, thanks for listening to Commercial Real Estate Pro Network's CREPN Radio.